The ship loomed over the Pacific like a second moon, its hull gleaming with alien alloys that defied human understanding. From its belly descended warriors from across the galaxy, each towering figure radiating arrogance, their every step a declaration: humanity will break first. Earth's military complex on the coast of New Zealand was buzzing with activity. Soldiers, scientists, and diplomats watched the procession with a mix of awe and suspicion. These weren't just any aliens. These were the galaxy's champions, Zorathian gladiators with scales harder than steel, SciFi mind weavers whose psychic prowess could shatter minds, and the brutal Urag marauders, infamous for reducing entire planets to ash. General Elena Park stood at the forefront, arms crossed, her face a mask of calm authority. The galactic emissary, a slender, iridescent Silpharian named Kishar, floated beside her, his expression unreadable. "Impressive display," Park remarked dryly, watching as the Zorathian leader let out a guttural roar that echoed across the base. Kishar tilted his head. "You misunderstand, General. These are not displays. These are warnings." Park smirked, unfazed. "Warnings don't mean much here. This is Earth. They'll learn that soon enough." As the last alien contingent descended, the field was filled with posturing. Warriors flexed their muscles, displayed their weapons, or showcased telekinetic feats, their confidence filling the air like static electricity. Human recruits stood nearby, silently observing. Their expressions ranged from mild curiosity to steely determination. They weren't intimidated, they were intrigued. "Attention," barked Master Sergeant Dwayne Harper, his voice sharp enough to cut through the cacophony of alien tongues. The gathered warriors turned their attention to the human veteran, a man with a presence so commanding even the Urag fell silent. Harper's gaze swept the crowd, lingering on the cockiest of them. "Welcome to the Human Unified Training Initiative," he began, pacing like a predator. "You're here because your species believes it's better, stronger, smarter than us. You're here to prove it." A Silphari stepped forward, her silvery hair shimmering. "There is no need for theatrics, human. We do not believe we are superior. We know it." Laughter rippled through the alien ranks, but Harper didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a dangerous, toothy grin. "Good. I like confidence. It makes failure so much more satisfying." The smirk disappeared as he barked, "First test starts now. 5 kilometers through the jungle with 70-pound packs. No tech, no enhancements. Just your strength, stamina, and wits." Murmurs of disbelief spread among the aliens. A Zorathian growled, his voice a deep rumble. "Primitive nonsense. What could this possibly prove?" Harper's eyes locked onto him. "That you're not as tough as you think." Within minutes, the contenders found themselves trudging through dense, unforgiving terrain. The jungle buzzed with life, its heat and humidity oppressive. The path was riddled with pitfalls, thick roots, and hidden dangers that even advanced alien sensors couldn't fully predict. The Zorathian, boasting earlier about his invincibility, was the first to falter. His massive frame, built for short bursts of power, wasn't suited for endurance. He collapsed, gasping for air, his scales steaming in the heat. Humans jogged past him, their expressions unreadable. The Silphari fared no better. Used to pristine environments and psychic dominance, she found the chaotic, sensory overload of the jungle overwhelming. Her concentration wavered, her telekinetic abilities faltering. She stumbled over a root and landed face-first in the mud. By the end of the trial, only a handful of aliens completed the course without collapsing, and even they were visibly shaken. In stark contrast, the humans finished as a group, their camaraderie and steady pace a stark reminder of what the program was about. Back at the base, the defeated aliens were silent, their earlier bravado replaced with confusion and unease. Harper addressed them again, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "That was the warm-up. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can keep up when it really matters." As the human recruits walked past, one alien muttered under his breath, "How do they do it?" The answer hung in the humid air, unspoken but obvious to those who dared to see it. Humanity's strength wasn't in their technology or physical prowess. It was in their endurance, their ability to thrive where others faltered, and their relentless determination to rise, no matter the odds. For the first time, the aliens began to wonder, What have we gotten ourselves into? The Urak warrior, Gorlith, towered over his human counterpart, a mountain of muscle and fury. He sneered, his tusks gleaming in the sunlight. You will kneel before this day is over. The human, a wiry recruit named Carter, merely shrugged. We'll see, he said, his tone calm, almost bored. The whistle blew, and the real test began. The aliens had underestimated Earth's training program from the moment they arrived. They believed strength and advanced physiology would carry them through. But Day 2 was designed to dismantle that notion entirely. Master Sergeant Harper stood before the assembled participants, clipboard in hand, his voice sharp and unyielding. Welcome to the endurance trials. No weapons. No enhancements. Just you, the course, and your will to survive. The course spanned 20 kilometers of brutal terrain. It wasn't just a test of physical stamina, it was a crucible. Mud pits, razor-sharp obstacles, and simulated environmental hazards lined the path. But the real challenge wasn't the terrain, it was the psychological warfare embedded in the trial. The Zorathians started strong. Their massive, armored frames bulldozed through obstacles with ease. But the further they went, the more their brute strength became a liability. The mud pits clung to their heavy scales, slowing them to a crawl. The narrow crawl spaces forced them to contort their bulky bodies unnaturally. What began as confident strides devolved into labored grunts and frustrated roars. The Sci-Fi, relying on their psychic abilities to anticipate challenges, found themselves overwhelmed by Earth's unpredictability. One section of the course featured randomized environmental traps, spikes shooting from the ground, bursts of fire, and falling debris, all triggered by pressure plates impossible to detect. Their telepathy faltered under the strain of constant vigilance, leaving them exhausted and disoriented. The Urak warriors, known for their berserker ferocity, charged ahead, smashing through barriers and laughing at the human recruits struggling behind them. But their brute tactics soon worked against them. By the halfway mark, their strength was sapped, their energy reserves depleted. Gorlith, the loudest and most boastful of the Urak, collapsed onto his knees, panting heavily as Carter jogged past him with an encouraging, almost there, big guy. While the aliens faltered, the human recruits pressed on with a quiet, determined efficiency. They paced themselves, working together to overcome obstacles that were impossible alone. Where the aliens competed, the humans collaborated. When one fell, another pulled them up. Their camaraderie was their greatest weapon. Near the course's end, a Sci-Fi stumbled, her legs shaking with exhaustion. A human recruit paused, offering her a hand. She hesitated, pride warring with desperation, before reluctantly accepting. Together, they crossed the final obstacle, a steep, slippery incline that required both strength and strategy. At the finish line, Harper stood with his arms crossed, observing as the participants staggered in. The humans arrived in groups, battered but smiling, while the aliens trickled in individually, many collapsing as soon as they crossed the line. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the alien contenders gathered in the mess hall, their silence heavy. The humiliation of their performance was a bitter pill to swallow. For species that prided themselves on physical and technological superiority, being outperformed by humans, a species they dismissed as primitive, was an unthinkable blow. Kisher, the Sci-Fi emissary, approached General Park, his expression tense. This endurance of yours. It defies logic. Your recruits are not stronger than ours. They are not faster. And yet. Park took a sip of her coffee, her gaze steady. They're not stronger, no. But they're tougher. Resilience isn't about how much you can give, it's about how much you can take and keep going. Kisher's glowing eyes narrowed. And what is the source of this resilience? Park leaned forward, her tone sharp. Adversity. Earth isn't a paradise like some of your worlds. We've faced extinction, war, famine, and more. We don't just endure hardship, we thrive in it. Later that night, the alien participants gathered in their quarters, licking their wounds and reflecting on the day's events. Gorlith, his earlier bravado extinguished, sat silently, staring at his hands. The Sci-Fi meditated, their telepathic network buzzing with questions and doubt. Even the Zorathians, who had been so confident in their physical dominance, spoke in hushed tones. The humans, meanwhile, sat around a fire outside, laughing and sharing stories about their day. They were tired, bruised, and muddy, but their spirits were unbroken. The contrast was stark, and it wasn't lost on the aliens. For the first time, they began to understand what Harper had said earlier: this isn't just training. It's transformation. The real challenge wasn't beating the humans. It was keeping up. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the simulation engines. Rows of alien participants sat in their chairs, their eyes locked on the glowing visors in front of them. This test is not about strength or speed, Harper said, pacing before them. It's about your mind. Let's see how sharp you really are. The mental challenges began early the next morning, after the alien contenders had barely recovered from the grueling endurance trials. Many expected something akin to a strategic battle simulation, a task where their advanced intelligence or psychic prowess could shine. What they encountered instead was something far more insidious. You'll each face a series of scenarios, Harper explained as the participants strapped into the simulation chairs. No two tests will be the same. Some will challenge your decision-making, others your emotional control. There are no right answers, just the consequences of your choices. The Zorathians, as always, exuded confidence. Strategy, they believed, was simple: crush opposition through superior force. The Sylphari, with their psychic finesse, seemed equally self-assured, assuming they could outthink any challenge. Even the brash Urag marauders smirked, eager to prove their dominance in yet another test. The humans, seated quietly among them, offered no boasts, only focus. Inside the simulation, reality blurred. Each participant found themselves immersed in a situation tailored to test their deepest vulnerabilities. For the Zorathian warlord Tkar, it was a battlefield shrouded in chaos. His forces were scattered, his weapons failing, his enemies outnumbering him 10-1. Every instinct told him to fight, but no matter how many enemies he crushed, more appeared. The simulation wasn't testing his combat prowess, it was testing his ability to adapt under impossible conditions. And Tkar, for all his strength, had none. He roared in frustration as the simulation reset, the lesson unlearned. The Sylphari emissary, Kisher, faced a moral conundrum. His simulation placed him in charge of an evacuation effort on a collapsing space station. He had to choose: save a handful of civilians or focus on the station's critical systems to ensure its stability. His psychic abilities failed to guide him through the swirling chaos of emotions and voices begging for help. Paralyzed by indecision, he watched as the station exploded, ending the simulation in failure. The humans, meanwhile, approached the simulations differently. Rather than reacting with force or attempting to outthink the challenges, they leaned into their instincts, their creativity. Recruit Carter, for example, found himself in a simulation where resources were scarce, and teamwork was the only way forward. Instead of competing with simulated allies, he collaborated, forging alliances and sharing supplies. The simulation rewarded his ingenuity. As the hours passed, the mental toll began to show. Zorathian tempers flared, their frustration boiling over as they failed to brute force their way through the tests. The Sylphari, overwhelmed by the emotional chaos embedded in their simulations, withdrew into themselves, their shimmering auras dimming. Even the Urek, so brash and boastful earlier, grew silent as their simplistic solutions yielded no success. The humans, too, struggled. These tests weren't designed to be easy, and their exhaustion was evident. But what set them apart was their resilience. Each failure was met with recalibration, each setback with a renewed effort. They adapted, learned, and pressed forward, no matter how grueling the scenarios became. By the end of the day, Harper reconvened the group in the debriefing room. The aliens looked visibly drained, their earlier confidence shattered. The humans, though weary, held their heads high. "This is why we put you through this," Harper said, his voice steady. "Strength and intelligence are useless without adaptability. Resilience isn't just surviving hardship, it's learning from it, growing stronger because of it." A Sylphari participant raised their hand. "And what of us? What are we supposed to take from this chaos?" Harper's lips curled into a faint smile. "The same thing humanity learned centuries ago: control is an illusion. Survival belongs to those who can face the unpredictable and thrive. As the participants filed out, murmurs spread among the aliens. Doubt, once unthinkable, had taken root. For the humans, however, the day's trials were proof of something greater. Their edge in this competition wasn't just physical or mental. It was their unyielding ability to face the unknown and emerge stronger. And tomorrow, they knew, would only bring greater challenges. The simulation dome pulsed with a dull, blue glow, casting long shadows over the gathered participants. General Park stood before the assembled aliens and humans, her voice sharp and direct. Today's trial is not about individual strength or intelligence. It's about working as a team. And let me be clear, failure isn't just possible. It's likely. The aliens exchanged glances, skepticism and disdain evident in their expressions. Teamwork, to them, was a crutch for the weak, a fallback for those unable to stand on their own. Among their ranks were some of the galaxy's most powerful warriors, individuals who had conquered, annihilated, and ruled without reliance on others. The idea that collaboration could surpass strength was alien in itself. The task was deceptively simple: infiltrate a fortified structure, retrieve a data module, and escape. The simulated environment, however, was anything but straightforward. The structure was a labyrinth of shifting walls, hidden traps, and armed drones programmed to adapt to their tactics. Success required coordination, trust, and adaptability, qualities that many of the aliens struggled to embody. As the simulation began, the Zorathian warlord Tkar took immediate charge, barking orders and asserting dominance over his group. "Follow me. We'll crush anything in our way," he roared, leading a charge down the first corridor. His brute force strategy worked for a while, until a wall slammed shut behind him, separating him from the rest of his team. Moments later, an ambush of drones overwhelmed him, his roars of frustration echoing through the maze. The SciFi attempted a more calculated approach. Using their telepathic link, they coordinated silently among themselves, mapping out the maze with precision. However, their reliance on psychic communication left their human teammates in the dark. When a critical section of the group was cut off by a trapdoor, the SciFi were unable to adapt, their carefully laid plans unraveling in an instant. The Urag marauders fared no better. Their instinctual reliance on brute aggression led to infighting over leadership and tactics. When one Urag suggested a strategy, another dismissed it as cowardice. Their bickering cost them precious time, and their group fell apart under the pressure of the simulation's relentless challenges. Meanwhile, the humans moved with quiet efficiency. They divided tasks based on individual strengths, maintained constant communication, and adjusted their plans on the fly. When an unexpected barrier split their team, they improvised, using their tools and wits to regroup quickly. Where the aliens saw obstacles, the humans saw opportunities. A moment of unity. As the simulation dragged on, the alien teams grew increasingly desperate. Their initial confidence was eroded by frustration and failure. In one corner of the maze, a Zorathian warrior and a SciFi telepath found themselves trapped together. With no other choice, they grudgingly worked together to disarm a trap blocking their path. It was an awkward, halting collaboration, but it worked. Elsewhere, Carter, the human recruit, found himself face-to-face with a cornered Urag warrior. The alien growled, tusks bared, ready to fight his way through. Carter held up his hands, signaling for calm. "We're on the same team, remember? Let's try it my way." Reluctantly, the Urag followed Carter's lead, their combined efforts breaking through a heavily fortified door. By the simulation's final phase, the teams had no choice but to cooperate. The labyrinth shifted, forcing groups to merge or fail. The humans took charge, guiding their alien counterparts with clear, concise instructions. They leveraged the Zorathian strength to move heavy obstacles, the SciFi's telepathy to detect hidden threats, and the Urag's raw aggression to clear defensive drones. The result was messy, chaotic, and far from perfect, but it worked. When the final module was retrieved and the teams exited the maze, they were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but victorious. In the debriefing room, Harper stood before the participants, his expression stern. "Today, You learned what it means to rely on others. Some of you adapted. Some of you didn't. But let me make one thing clear. On the battlefield, survival depends on more than individual skill. It depends on the team. The aliens sat in silence, their earlier arrogance replaced with introspection. Tkar, still nursing his wounded pride, muttered under his breath, "Strength alone isn't enough." Kisher, the SciFi emissary, nodded slowly. Humanity thrives because they understand this fundamental truth: unity is power. Carter exchanged glances with his fellow recruits, a small smile tugging at his lips. The humans had proven their mettle once again, not just through skill, but through the very thing the aliens had dismissed as weakness: collaboration. As the participants left the debriefing room, there was a noticeable shift. The alien contenders, though far from fully embracing humanity's methods, had taken a critical first step. For the first time, they saw value in what they had once dismissed. And the humans? They saw the beginnings of something greater, a chance to teach the galaxy what it truly meant to work together. The next challenge awaited, and with it, the promise of further transformation. The storm descended without warning, tearing through the simulated jumble with unrelenting fury. Rain lashed against their faces, mud swallowed their boots, and distant explosions sent shockwaves through the ground. "Survive this," Harper's voice crackled through their comms, "and you'll understand what it means to endure." The final test was designed to push every participant to their absolute limit. A survival gauntlet spanning 50 kilometers of treacherous terrain awaited them. The participants were given a simple briefing: make it to the extraction point within 48 hours, overcoming every obstacle in their path. There were no further instructions, no reassurances, only the grim knowledge that failure meant expulsion from the program. The opening stretch of the gauntlet was a crucible of disorientation. The Zorathians, as usual, surged ahead, their massive frames cutting through dense foliage with brute force. Tkar led the charge, his confidence renewed after the teamwork exercise. Yet as the rain intensified, even their mighty strides faltered. The ground beneath them turned to sludge, and the weight of their armored bodies became a liability. One by one, the Zorathians slowed, their strength sapped by the unrelenting terrain. The SciFi struggled in a different way. Their telepathic abilities, so reliable in controlled environments, were overwhelmed by the cacophony of the storm and the fear radiating from their companions. Kisher, who had prided himself on his unshakable focus, found himself faltering as his psychic defenses crumbled. The jungle was not a battlefield they could outthink, it was chaos personified. For the Urak, the gauntlet was an exercise in frustration. Used to frontal assaults and clear objectives, they found themselves disoriented by the unpredictability of the terrain. Gorlith cursed under his breath as he waded through waist-deep mud, his fury mounting with every step. He had never faced an enemy he couldn't fight, and the realization gnawed at him. The humans, meanwhile, took a different approach. They moved in small groups, adapting their pace to the conditions and assisting one another when the terrain grew too challenging. They didn't aim to conquer the gauntlet, they aimed to survive it. Midway through the trial, the participants reached a ravine that marked the gauntlet's most dangerous segment. A fragile rope bridge stretched across the chasm, swaying precariously in the wind. Beneath it, a roaring river promised certain death for anyone who fell. The Zorathians reached the bridge first. Tkar hesitated for the first time, his massive frame ill-suited for the narrow bridge. He glanced back at the SciFi, who arrived moments later, their lighter forms seemingly better suited for the crossing. Kisher offered no assistance, his focus entirely on his own survival. When the humans arrived, they quickly assessed the situation. "We go one at a time," Carter said, his voice steady. "Lightest first, heaviest last. If it sways too much, we stop and rebalance." The alien scoffed at the suggestion. Gorlith pushed forward, his impatience overriding any sense of caution. The bridge groaned under his weight, the ropes fraying dangerously. Before disaster could strike, Carter and another recruit stepped forward, steadying the ropes and guiding the Urak across. Kisher watched, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Why would you help him? He's not even one of your own." Carter shrugged. "Because if we don't, we all fail." As the group pressed on, the gauntlet grew even harsher. Traps, wild predators, and simulated ambushes tested their every move. One Zorathian fell to exhaustion, unable to continue. A SciFi panicked and triggered a trap, narrowly avoiding serious injury. The humans, though battered and bruised, pressed on with quiet determination, their teamwork a stark contrast to the disarray among the aliens. In the final hours, the remaining participants emerged from the jungle, the extraction point in sight. A flare shot into the sky, signaling the end of the trial. The humans arrived as a group, supporting one another. The aliens trickled in separately, their unity shattered, their confidence diminished. Harper stood before them once more, his expression unreadable. "Congratulations to those who made it," he said. "But let's be clear, this wasn't about who's the strongest, the smartest, or even the fastest. This was about who could endure. Who could adapt. Who could rise above their own ego to survive." The room was silent as the weight of his words sank in. Tkar stared at the ground, his earlier bravado extinguished. Kishar folded his arms, his expression unreadable but contemplative. Even Gorlith, who had spent the trial snarling at every challenge, seemed humbled. Carter exchanged a glance with his fellow recruits, a flicker of pride in his eyes. The humans had not only survived, they had thrived. As the aliens filed out of the room, whispers spread among them. Humanity, once dismissed as a lesser species, had proven something undeniable. Their strength wasn't in their technology or their physical prowess, it was in their unyielding spirit, their ability to rise above adversity and work together. The test had ended, but its impact was just beginning. For the first time, the galaxy's mightiest warriors saw humanity not as an anomaly, but as a force to be reckoned with. And for humanity, this was only the beginning. The holographic display flickered to life, showcasing the final results of the training program. Alien names, once symbols of pride and power, were paired with failure rates and early exits. At the top, a cluster of human names stood bold and unyielding, their endurance marking the undeniable truth: Earth's recruits had not just competed, they had conquered. The air in the debriefing chamber was heavy with unspoken tension. The surviving participants sat in silence, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, disbelief, and reluctant respect. What had started as a contest of superiority had ended as a humbling lesson. The aliens, who had once arrived brimming with confidence, now bore the scars of their own arrogance. General Elena Park stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the group. "You've all survived something extraordinary," she began, her tone sharp but not unkind. "What you faced wasn't just a test of strength or intelligence, it was a test of spirit. And that's where humanity excels." Her words were met with a range of reactions. Tkar, the once proud Zorathian warlord, stared at his hands, the weight of his failures evident in his hunched posture. Kishar, the SciFi emissary, sat motionless, his shimmering aura dimmed but contemplative. Even Gorlith, the boisterous Urak warrior, seemed subdued, his usual bluster replaced with a quiet intensity. After the debriefing, the participants were given a rare moment of reprieve. They gathered in the mess hall, their competitive edges dulled by shared hardship. The humans sat together, laughing and recounting their experiences, their camaraderie as unyielding as ever. To everyone's surprise, it was Kishar who broke the invisible barrier. The SciFi approached the human table, his expression unreadable. "Your resilience is remarkable," he admitted, the words seeming foreign on his tongue. "We underestimated you." Carter, the wiry human recruit who had stood out in every trial, looked up with a small smile. "We get that a lot." The room rippled with a mixture of laughter and murmurs. Other aliens began to join the humans, their earlier disdain softened into something resembling respect. Tkar, though hesitant, eventually approached as well. "Your methods are chaotic," he said gruffly, "but effective. I see their merit." The next day, the Galactic Council representatives arrived for the closing ceremony. The once diverse group of contenders now stood as a unified formation, their ranks thinned but their spirits irrevocably changed. The council emissary, a towering, insectoid Letharian, addressed the assembly. This experiment was intended to foster understanding, the emissary began, their voice reverberating. What it has revealed is something far greater. Humanity's capacity for resilience, adaptability, and unity is a strength that cannot be ignored. Medals were distributed to the survivors, each symbolizing not just completion but transformation. For the aliens, it was a mark of humility earned through struggle. For the humans, it was a testament to their rise as contenders in a galaxy that had once dismissed them. In the days that followed, alliances began to form where rivalries once existed. The Zorathians, inspired by humanity's tenacity, proposed joint training initiatives to integrate Earth's methods into their own. The Silphari, humbled by their mental trials, sought to exchange knowledge of telepathic techniques with human strategists. Even the Urek, despite their brutish nature, recognized the value of Earth's teamwork and discipline. General Park observed these developments with quiet satisfaction. "This is how it starts," she said to Harper, standing on the observation deck of the base. "The galaxy came here to test us, but they're leaving with something far more valuable: respect." Harper nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And maybe a little fear." As the alien participants departed Earth, they carried stories of their experiences. Tales of human recruits outpacing Zorathian warriors, outthinking Silphari strategists, and outlasting Urag marauders spread like wildfire across the galaxy. What had been intended as a trial of humanity's worth had instead become a defining moment in interstellar history. For Earth, the implications were profound. No longer seen as an underdog, humanity had proven itself as a force to be reckoned with, one built not on technological superiority or physical dominance, but on the unyielding spirit to adapt, endure, and overcome. In the quiet of the training complex, Carter stood alone, gazing at the jumble where so much of the trial had unfolded. Harper approached, his footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. "You did good out there," Harper said. Carter turned, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't just me. We all did." Harper nodded. "That's the point. Humanity's strength isn't in individuals, it's in all of us together. Remember that." As Harper walked away, Carter looked back at the jumble, a small smile on his face. The trials were over, but the story of humanity's rise was just beginning.